What's a simple concept from your field of study that the average person doesn't seem to understand? Blind people having vision. Only something like 10% see nothing, not black nothing. The rest all have varying degrees of vision impairment, all for different reasons. A lot of our students have light perception at the very least. People are always surprised by that. Edit. Comments proving my point. Lol, it's really difficult to wrap your head around as a sighted person. Have people who've lost one or both eyes, I mean total removal, not just their vision is lost through damage, written or talked about this? As somebody with vision, the concept of experiencing nothing in terms of visual input is so foreign to me it's inconceivable. Most like me probably presume it's like having your eyes permanently masked where no light arrives and it's just dark. But the way you state it suggests to me there's just no input whatsoever, like how we do not detect radiation, microwave, radio, through any input. This happened to me about a decade ago. Got so dehydrated by food poisoning that it took 4 liters of the fourth fluid to bring me back up. I remember at least a minute or so where my vision system just shut down completely. I could still hear things but could not see, and it wasn't black, it was nothing. As though eyes didn't exist. There's really no way to make it relatable. It's kind of like a TV being switched off versus a black screen, but of course that analogy is imperfect. Eerie and unpleasant sensation. If you're, like most of us, used to seeing things. That actually makes sense. You reminded me that I have actually experienced nothingness. In terms of vision, when I lost consciousness due to low electrolytes after a plasma donation. I'm also remembering standing up too quickly from a horizontal position and having low blood pressure. I could feel myself sink to my hands and knees but couldn't see or hear. Maybe it's similar to that. Honestly, yeah, almost passing out is probably the best comparison. I have fainting spells, and every time it's like my eyes were turned off. They were there, they were working. I didn't see black. I just couldn't tell you a damn thing I saw. Like my eyes went numb. Librarian here. If you want your library to have new books, you must be prepared to get rid of the same amount of old books. Because I have to dispose of books secretly, as the public just don't seem to realize that we can't house a collection that grows by tens or hundreds of thousands of books every year. For the pedantic, I said amount, rather than number. For a reason, books and archives are commonly measured in linear meters or kilometers, as that tells us how much storage space is required. I was talking to a school librarian, and this one drove her nuts. By law, Texas, the books had to be destroyed and not donated or sold. At the end of the year, she would let teachers know that if any books from a certain shelf went missing, she wouldn't notice. Edit. I'm not sure if that was a state or district policy. What could possibly be the justification for that law? The way it was explained to me was allowing donations and selling would end up with books being bought just to be sold or donated, so funds would be diverted from their original purpose. I never said it made sense. That law is idiotic and tracks with a lot of Texas education decisions I've heard about. Libraries near me have old library copies in their sale. The money benefits the library and the book's going away anyway. I like that librarians measure books in linear meters. Same amount of book. Is like Ken saying he does beach. I work in theater and it's very common to buy used books by the meter for set decoration. Since we don't really care about the content and they won't get opened, it's a good way for the booksellers in the city to squeeze a little extra profit out of books that are otherwise hard to sell due to interior damage or just obscurity, and they give us great deals. I love that this answers Opie's question so well. It's simple and obvious only when you think through it or have it explained to you. How do you decide which books to dispose of? How much effort do you put into finding the old books a new home? I have a librarian parent and have volunteered at the library myself. Generally, books to be disposed of are not checked out, either not at all or not often enough. These are collected and organized on tables in a spare room in the library. The libraries then have book sales for a few days, usually run by volunteers, and on the final sales day, an entire paper grocery bag full of books can be purchased for $5. Books remaining after the end of the sale are disposed of. Everything has to be proofread, yes, even if it's only a 3-word sentence. As a proofreader, I can confidently state that it's perfectly possible to fuck up one single word. 3-word sentence. Case in point. Orthodontist here. Making braces tighter does not make the teeth move faster. Have patients daily asking me to make the brace even tighter because they can take it and finish faster as a result. Teeth move quickest and most efficiently with very low, sustained force application. It's like trying to get yourself out of quicksand. Yanking with all your might leaves you in exactly the same place, but slow, continuous, gently force gets you to where you want to go. Usually after explaining this, they shrug as if I'm trying to pull one over on them and proceed to ask me to make it tighter next time. I wish you had told my orthodontist this. Over 20 years later, and I still feel like that man was a sadist. Even if he didn't tighten too much, the wire can still snap. I don't have scars from braces. Mentally, I do, however, have scars. Waking up with that damn wire deep inside my cheeks. How TF did I sleep through that? Sure, if you want me to permanently fuck up your teeth, please sign here that this was a decision made by you, who is not a licensed medical professional. Bad idea. People would sign that shit and then sue you. Yeah, I assume most orthodontists don't need a quick buck to carry out the whims of their idiot clients. If a tattoo artist who makes a lot less can tell their client, no way in hell will we do that, when they ask for something too stupid or damaging, then I think a teeth doc would do the same. Honestly, the amount of people on Reddit who say something along the lines of, just do them and make them sign a contract, when it comes to anything stupid is mind-blowing, as if every choice as a professional doesn't carry some sort of moral implication or reflect on your business or personal reputation as a whole. Granted, I'm sure there's people from every profession that are willing to stretch that line for money, but I'm talking in general. Most people don't do extremely stupid shit like this when their livelihood is on the line. Some people learn faster than others. College taught me a very painful lesson about the difference between being smart and being a quick learner. I was a TA in grad school for classes in engineering. I remember this one student who came to almost every office hours and worked through the problem sets and material to make sure she understood it. She ended up with a low B/High C and apologized to me for taking up so much of my time and not getting an A. I told her that she is the type of student I like to teach because she wanted to learn the material and I could see consistent progress. I also told her she is going to be successful because that kind of discipline to teach yourself new material is not common, and to not get caught up with the grade but focus on the fact that she is learning it. I will always remember her because of that. I hope she is doing well. That was very kind of you to give her that kind of encouragement. You should look her up and find out how she's doing. This reminds me of a middle school student that I once had. She asked tons of questions, and sometimes prefaced them with an apology for taking up time. I made it crystal clear to her that she should never stop asking questions, nor should she apologize for them. I drilled it into her that her investigative personality would benefit her in her studies and future career. We kept in touch for a pretty long time. Last time I talked to her, she had been accepted into a forensics program at a top university. A lot of criminals are going to be royally fucked once she enters the field law. On a related note, her questions were beyond helpful to me as a teacher. She was a good student and she always paid attention, so her questions were almost always about an important detail that I had glossed over, something that I hadn't explained well, or a topic that the class needed to spend more time on. That's why I failed and eventually dropped out of college. Everything through to the end of high school took zero effort or studying. Suddenly I got to college and I needed to put in effort that I wasn't capable of, to learn things I didn't want to learn, for a degree I didn't want to get. I went on academic probation the first year, and stayed on for 6 more years until I finally dropped out. This is why I encouraged my daughter to quit and just start working and getting experience. I knew she didn't want to be there and wouldn't put in the work, and we'd just be wasting a lot of money. She was so wrapped up in what the proper path is after high school she couldn't give herself the grace to not go to college. Had to show her it wasn't for everyone and it's not required to be successful. There are multiple different paths to get where you want to go. And some people are great test takers and don't actually learn the concepts well for long-term use. Communication isn't what you're saying. It's what the other person is understanding. The amount of times at work that I'd read public-facing communication that someone wrote and say, "Okay, yes, you know what you're saying, I know what you're saying, but can you help me understand how an average person without our level of context would possibly understand?" It's about your reader-listener, not about you. Don't just think from inside the walls of your own brain, make at least some basic attempt to put yourself in theirs. Technical writing is the most underrated college course. I'll have colleagues ask me to proof their document and my first question is often, "Who is your audience?" Context matters. Can't find it, but I remember a list of a bunch of different ways miscommunication can occur. 1. What you actually say. 2. What you think you are saying. 3. What you think the recipient is hearing. 4. What the recipient is actually hearing. 5. What the recipient thinks he is hearing. And so on. Just because something is alleged in a lawsuit, doesn't mean it's actually true. Non-attorneys are very easily influenced by reports of allegations in a lawsuit. The reality is a lawsuit is just a series of allegations that may or may not be true. I have been deposed 3 times, and they have been the single worst experiences of my life. In hindsight, I believe I actually did okay, but the tension and build-up is awful. The first deposition, the opposing attorney asked a question. Our attorney said, "Objection, insert reason." And I was thinking, boom. You got objected. Then, after an awkward silence, our attorney looked at me and chuckled. You still have to answer the question. The best part, they prepped me and I was well aware of that going in. I sort of lost my biscuits in the moment. They also told me, 1. I don't know. Means you likely never knew the answer. 2. I don't recall remember. Means you may have known the answer at one point, but don't now. 3. If presented with a document to read, read it. If you are being presented with a document, there is a reason, and you can be sure the deposing attorney has read it. The other thing that struck me was how friendly the opposing lawyers were with one another. They were chatting about ski trips, etc. Once we went on the record, the tone changes. Is it always like that? Not sure why, TV. I sorta thought opposing attorneys would be more contentious. Also, the cases I was deposed in never went to court, but is being a witness in a trial as nerve-wracking as depositions? 1. Yes, we are typically cordial and friendly with each other. We work with these people regularly. 2. TV's portrayal of lawyer is probably the worst representation of an industry. When I prep a client, my first comment is always, "This is not like you see on TV." People are not made to live forever, and modern medicine, while amazing, cannot make miracles happen. So many times we have a patient who is on a ventilator and unable to be taken off. Plus their kidneys are shot and they are requiring continuous bedside dialysis. Plus their heart is failing and they are on 2 to 4 continuous infusions of medication to make it function properly and prevent circulatory collapse. That is multi-system organ failure. Even if we can get one system back, the chances of a meaningful recovery are very slim. If I turn off any of my machines or a bag of one of their meds runs dry, they're gonna die. Because they are on a huge amount of life support, but the family still will be thinking they're gonna walk and talk out of the hospital. And, even if they do live, a lot of them are going to get a trach and feeding tube and then go on to live the rest of their lives in a facility where they still need 24/7 care. Where they may or may not still be ventilator dependent. where they likely cannot speak and definitely cannot eat or drink anything by mouth. Some will never, for the rest of their lives, be able to safely eat or drink by mouth again. Many will be incontinent and bedbound and likely never regain their strength back. If you ever have a family member in the ICU on life support, think long and hard about it, because a lot of what we do to sustain life is literal torture. As a nurse, I have tried to impress upon my family how much I do not want this for myself if the situation arises. It's good to have these conversations and, especially if you're older or sicker, put them in writing. My daughter is a nurse and we talked about giving her medical power of attorney a couple days ago. This is ahead of my wife. Physics teacher. Scientific literacy is pretty poor in general. Lots of people struggle to interpret a graph correctly. Lots of people struggle to distinguish between variables, like velocity versus acceleration. This is perhaps more niche for science education than the real world, but you'd be amazed how many people think skidivers stop completely or even shoot upwards when they open their chutes. Lots of people don't appreciate the difference between an absolute change, plus 10, and a proportional change, plus 10%. This has huge repercussions for all sorts of real-world problems, like their savings for retirement, house price or debt. People have no idea what proportional means, or why a variable is called that. Had a math teacher ends with a comic on her door. But teacher, yesterday you said x was equal to 5. The general population having no understanding of how to interpret basic statistics and data really scares me. That is the very reason people are so easily fooled by numbers and mass manipulated with fake news. It doesn't help that a vast majority of people don't seem to understand the concept of correlation versus causation, and also how important wording is in polling. Saw a recent article bemoaning Democrats because support for policies that strengthen families has declined in the last 10 years, but the question referred to traditional families, and hasn't updated its language in 10 years, which I understand because you don't want to change variables in longitudinal polling like this. I commented to my friend who shared the article with me that I would hesitate to infer that this is a decline in Democrats caring about family, as it is Democrats responding negatively based on how the meaning of traditional families has changed over the past 10 years. I'd be willing to bet if you updated the language to policies to strengthen families and improve parent-child relationships, then you'd see a massive uptick in Democratic support. Edited because the previous version of that last paragraph was a hot mess of comprehensibility. 911 Dispatch. When you call me and I ask you questions, I don't need a life story for each one. A simple yes or no will suffice. If it doesn't, I will ask you to clarify. The most important things we need to know are where you are and what's going on. Most of the 911 centers have people that take calls and people who do dispatch. If I'm getting info from you, it goes right to a dispatcher who sends police, fire and medical. My continuing to get info from you doesn't slow that process down. It enhances getting you the right help. You may know where you are, and God may know where you are. But if I don't know where you are, you're fucked. Just give me your location, FFS. I work in communications, and that every piece of work I produce has to be at a readable level for a 9-year-old. It's so time-consuming taking over complicated information and trying to simplify it. So if you work with a comms team, keep it straightforward and easy. Flowery language and big words will get cut. Information technology, it involves a lot of Googling. A very relevant skill requirement is simply that we know how to Google efficiently and aren't afraid to poke at things to see what they do. Seriously, if you don't know, learn some basic browser search skills, like putting a word in quotes to make it required, using dashes to exclude certain words, using after date to filter by date, and so on. I feel like Google broke this function in recent years. If I search for Afghani muslin. As in the fabric, I'll get results for Afghani Muslim. The religious identity, even if I don't click. Did you mean Muslim? Using the dashes or quotation marks is working for me today, but I've had times that they don't work for whatever reason. There's two main reasons that when you cook a restaurant favorite at home it doesn't taste as good. One, the person who made the dish used all of the things your doctor told you to avoid. It's full of butter and salt and all that good stuff. When you substitute healthy options it doesn't taste as good. Or at least it doesn't taste the same. To the people who made your dish have done it hundreds of times? Or thousands of times? You can get very good at a dish cooking it at home for yourself, but mastering a dish takes a kind of repetition that is rarely seen outside of a professional kitchen. Whenever the topic of restaurant food comes up on Reddit, their explanation from people working in kitchens is always along the lines of butter, more butter than you could possibly imagine. I decided to experiment by cooking vegetables in butter, which I don't normally do, and to be fair they were much tastier. Then I added a truly ludicrous amount of butter, several times what I'd consider a reasonable amount. Suddenly everyone loved them. Psychologists, therapists, counselors are not there to give you advice or opinions. They may sometimes do that, but they should do so very infrequently, not including psychoeducation, where evidence-based techniques or facts are shared to hopefully aid a client in feeling better in some relevant area. That's what your friends are for. Therapists are there to help you talk to yourself in a way that helps you discover, organize and understand your life and yourself better, so you can come to your own conclusions and your own decisions. Therapists are trained to be your mirror, to help you externalize what you have inside, emotions, experiences, beliefs, etc. That's part of why you hear sometimes that therapists hold space. It's as though they hold up the walls of a space for you to throw all your stuff up onto, have a real good look at, and hopefully get a new perspective on it, or at least feel better afterwards due to the cathartic effect. Most people will never sit and truly talk to themselves, even in journaling, in a way that isn't just spiraling reinforcing false beliefs and unhelpful blind spots. A therapist forces you to spend time with yourself and is trained to help you stay in that space and make real sense of what you choose to talk about in session. Also, related, therapy is not for sick people, crazy people, disturbed people. It's for people. The concept of getting things in their historical context. To be fair, many historians seem to have a hard time doing this as well. Humans didn't evolve from chimpanzees. Chimpanzees are our nearest living relative species. Humans and chimpanzees both evolved from the same ancient species, which no longer exists in that form but does still exist in the form of humans and chimpanzees. The fact that chimpanzees still exist does not disprove that humans evolved from other apes.